بینەران بیسەرانی خۆشەویستی ڕووداوم کاتتان باش من لە دیدارێکی تایبەت لە شاری نیویۆرکی ئەمریکاوە لەگەڵتانم لەگەڵ بەڕێز دکتۆر دیڤید فیلیپس کە سەرۆکی بەشی ئاشتی و مافەکانی مرۆڤ لە زانکۆی کۆلۆمبیا بۆی باسی کاریگەریەکانی هەڵبژاردنەکانی ئەمریکا بۆ سەر کورد بکەین. بەڕێز فیلیپس زۆری لەسەر کورد نووسیوە، توێژینەوەی تایبەتی کردووە لە باشترین زانکۆکەکانی ئەمریکا و هەروە چەند کتێبێکی لەسەر کورد نووسیوە، ئاگاداری وردەکاری دۆخی کوردستان، پێویستیەکانی دۆخی باشووری کوردستان، ڕۆژئاوای کوردستانە و هەروەها پێشتر ڕاوێژکار بووە لە واشنگتن لە وەزارەتی دەرەوەی ئەمریکا، لەبەرەوە شارەزای سیاسەتی ئەمریکاشە، سیاسەتی دەرەوەی ئەمریکا. لەبەرەوە پێم گرنگە قسەی لەگەڵ بکەم بۆ چوونی وەربگرین. وەکو دەبینن ئەم هەفپەیڤینە لە ژوورەوە ئەنجامانداوە، چکە لە دەرەوە بارانە، ناچاری لە ژوورەوە ئەنجامی بدەین. لە نیویۆرک دۆخی کۆڕۆنا پەتاکە ئەوەندە خراپە کە لە هەموو بینایەک لە هەموو باڵەخانەیەک پێویستە ماسکت لەسەر دەمبێ، هەر کاتێک لە ژوورەوە دابنیشی هیچ ڕێگەکی تیانە پێویستە ماسکەکە لەسەر دەمبێ بۆ ئەوەی خۆت پارێزی و بەرامبەرەکەتیش پارێزی. لە ئەمریکا کۆڕۆنا پەتاکە زۆر بڵاوە، ئەوە بەشێک دەبێت لەو گفتوگۆیی کە ئەنجامی دەین. Thank you very much for being with us. I always appreciate it. I'm going to start with the masks that we are wearing. After months of the pandemic, more than it's going to be 7 months, the start of the heat of the pandemic in the US, we still have to wear masks inside. We still have hundreds of death toll. How do you think the American public is frustrated by this, and do you think this will lead to for Donald Trump to lose the White House and the elections?
So the American public should be outraged at what's going on. You know, we knew as early as February that this was a deadly disease, that it was airborne. Instead of telling the American people what was going on so they could make decisions about social distancing and mask wearing, Donald Trump covered it up. As a result of that, we're now looking at 220,000 Americans that are dead. 8 million have been infected. What kind of an outrageous situation is that? That the most developed and industrialized country in the world can't take steps to keep its citizens safe. This is a huge breakdown.
But even according to the polls that show Biden wins, you still have a big margin of the population that still support Donald Trump. Do you think enough people will be outraged as you, according to your analysis, in the upcoming elections, and vote for Biden instead of Trump?
So I think there are a lot of factors that will determine how people vote. How the Trump administration has handled the COVID pandemic is just one. The diminished prestige of the United States internationally, the failure to lead globally, the complete inability to be honest and straightforward with the American people about the COVID crisis. This is a perfect storm of problems created by the Trump administration and Donald Trump in particular. The American voters are outraged. The fact that we have to wear these masks so deep into the pandemic is a measure of America's failure to deal with the COVID crisis at the beginning. If the president had been straight with us, had told us what was going on, if we had adopted measures to manage and control the spread of the virus, things would be different today. I, for one, am outraged. My family is outraged. All my friends are outraged. The fact that Americans even debate the need to wear a mask is outrageous. Let's get this problem solved once and for all. That's not going to happen with Donald Trump in the White House. He just makes matters worse by diminishing the importance of social distancing and mask wearing. There will be some tough decisions ahead, but those are decisions that a Biden administration should be taking to protect the American people.
And speaking of Biden administration, most of our audience are Kurds, and they're wondering, does this election matter for Kurds in the Middle East? Biden or Trump for the next 4 years? Why someone in Kurdistan should care about the result of this election?
So people in Kurdistan and Kurds should care deeply about this election because the track record of the Trump administration and its treatment of Kurds is deplorable. It invited Turkey to send in its armed forces and its jihadist proxies in a conversation that Trump had with Erdogan on October 6th. As a result of that, tens of thousands of people were displaced in Rojava and many people were killed, not just Kurds, but Armenians, Syriacs, and Christians. When it comes to Iraqi Kurdistan, the Trump administration embraced a one Iraq policy. Instead of supporting the referendum to choose about independence, it stuck to its one Iraq policy and denied the Kurds the right to self-determination. And today is the anniversary of the outrage that occurred in Kirkuk. The Trump administration, for all of its bluster about Iran, invited the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to come in through its representatives in Baghdad and denied Kirkukis the right to choose their own path.
You're absolutely right. As a Kurd, I cannot deny that this is how I see it and many Kurds have seen it. But will Biden abandon the one Iraq policy? Will Biden say, okay, let's leave thousands of troops in Syria to save the Kurds? Aren't they going to be more or less the same? The withdrawal from Middle East, some say, is a U.S. strategy. The Middle East doesn't matter to the United States strategically anymore. Don't you think it will be the same?
So the United States should care about its friends and allies. The People's Protection Forces in Syria lost 13,000 fighters and who were killed, and at least twice that amount who were seriously injured. After going to war at our behest to defeat the Islamic State, to throw them under the bus is completely deplorable, lacks all integrity. Joe Biden was the author of the Biden-Gell plan to decentralize power from Baghdad and devolve power to the regions in Iraq. Everybody knows that the problem with Iraq has always been too much centralization. A regime in Baghdad which abused the power.
But you're right, during Bush in the Congress, Joe Biden was supporting a project and proposed a project to decentralize Iraq, divided by three. But later, when he became vice president in the Obama administration, the Iraq file was with him. I'm sure you know, he was responsible for Iraq file. And he supported Nouri Maliki, the idea of making Maliki the strongman of Iraq, of leaving Iraq, the withdrawal from Iraq, basically left the Kurds to deal with Baghdad. And we know the result of that policy. 2014, ISIS taking over. Don't you think Biden also changed his mind afterward? Someone that is not principled in that sense, that he's not the person that says, I believe in a decentralized Iraq right now.
So Joe Biden knows Iraq, he knows Kurdistan. He's not going to throw the Iraqi Kurds under the bus. He's going to insist on implementation of Article 140. He's going to look to empower more Peshmerga to create a stronger, decentralized local government. Yes, you're right. There were some disappointing decisions made by the Obama administration, but it will be more principled and more pragmatic in the future. So the Kurds can count on a democratic administration to understand their needs, to work effectively to advance their goals, as opposed to the Trump administration, which actively undermined Kurdish interests.
I see. And you raise a very important point, principled, pragmatic policy. We don't see that from Trump administration in the Middle East or
anywhere else. We don't see any policies from the Trump administration. They just ignore global responsibilities. They ignore their domestic responsibilities. So no, there's nothing principled or pragmatic about the Trump administration at all. There's no recognition of the sacrifice that Kurds have made. It's time to rectify that situation for the U.S. to appreciate its friends and allies. The U.S. has no better friends in the world than the Kurds. And if we don't start treating the Kurds like friends and allies, we're going to find that we have no allies and no friends, and that Iraq is just a wasteland, an Iranian front line.
Dr. Phillips, let's come to the other scenario. Donald Trump, president for the next 4 years. And you know his close relationship to Erdogan, lack of commitment to Iraq. What do you think he will do next based on what he's saying and his administration is saying when it's come to Syria, for example?
So we know that the Trump Organization accepted millions of dollars in licensing fees from Turkish concerns. We also know that Azerbaijani oligarchs were paying money to the Trump Organization. What we don't know is how much Turkish concerns have already invested in the Trump Organization. There's $421 million of debt.
And he admitted last night on record.
For which he's personally liable. So where did that money come from? To whom does the Trump Organization owe the money? What promises have been made by Erdogan to Trump to bail him out in the future? The U.S. needs to be principled in its international relations. And as long as you have a president who is running a business while he's running the United States, it compromises our core national interests.
Absolutely. And coming to that question of the future of the Kurds in Syria. The Kurds in Syria don't have involvement in the UN political process. No party, major party in Syria is dealing with them. The Russians are talking to them, but they're totally reliant on a US presence in Syria. How cautious and frankly saying, how bleak is their future from your perspective? You're someone that knows what happens in DC, the decision-making process, and knows the details of Kurdish politics. How pessimistic are you when it's come to their future in Syria?
So before Syrian Kurds agreed to accept the invitation from the United States to fight a war on America's behalf against ISIS, they should have made crystal clear what they expected at the back end of that. Instead, they trusted that the Trump administration would deliver goals to them. The Trump administration is completely untrustworthy. Thousands of people have been killed, and the Syrian Kurds got nothing for it. They are in an extremely difficult position right now. We've betrayed them. We've thrown them under the bus. They have no friend but the mountains, and there are no mountains in northern Syria.
What options do they have? What should they do out of this quagmire?
It's in the interests of the Syrian Democratic Forces to keep ISIS at bay. So they should continue to do that. But they should do it because it's in their interest, not because the U.S. asked them to. If they want to be effective in advancing Kurdish interests, they need to consider what their goals are, who they can rely on in order to advance those goals. The fact that the U.S. hasn't demanded that Syrian Kurds be seated in Geneva at the table to discuss the Constitution is just outrageous. How is it possible that a group that controls 30% of Syria's territory, which numbers in the millions, is relegated to the backbench? The Syrian Kurds should be front and center. Their views should be considered. The U.S. should be their voice. Instead, it's the exact opposite. The Trump administration ignores them and does everything possible to marginalize them, all at Erdogan's request and in Turkey's interest.
Yeah, and absolutely. And there's the United States role and what happened to Iraq. I want to come to it. It's the anniversary of what happened in Kirkuk in October 16, 2017. Kurds were controlling Kirkuk. Kirkuk, as far as many Kurds consider, was liberated finally after a century of what they consider occupation or other forces being there. Overnight it was handed over, or Iraqi forces kicked out of Peshmerga and Kurdish forces. There are problems of setting up facts from what you know from here, what you heard as an observer, as a researcher. What happened on October 16 in 2017?
So in my book, The Great Betrayal, I have a chapter that describes what happened. There was a decision made in Washington to allow the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, working through the central government in Baghdad, and Shiite militia, to walk into Kirkuk and to control it. That decision couldn't have been done on its own. It was a decision that was taken jointly with members of the Talibani family. And I remember several times Mam Jalal telling me, Kirkuk is our Jerusalem. We would never abandon it. He would roll in his grave to see what his sons and family members have done to Kirkuk? Have they betrayed Kurdish national aspirations?
And definitely Washington was on board to allow, we are looking at an administration that is anti-Iran in any way you can possibly see. No administration being anti-Iran as this administration, but they allowed the Iranian National Guard to take over one of the most strategic cities outside in the region. How can Kurds in Iraq ever trust the Americans again after what happened in 2017?
Well, I understand that the Kurds in Iraq rightly feel betrayed and are rightly angered about what happened. They can never trust the Trump administration again, or Trump administration officials. Hopefully we can turn the page, we can restore our good relations with Iraqi Kurds, we can work together to stabilize Iraq. What we need to also understand is that the government in Baghdad is not an Iraqi government, it's a proxy for Iran. And everything that Maliki has done and others have done over the years served to advance Iran's interests. What a farce it is to talk about a maximum pressure campaign on Iran at the same time as we acquiesce to Iran interests in Iraq. It's time for a fix.
Absolutely, and part of that is Kurdish advocacy is very important in the United States. And I wanted to know someone that's really involved in Kurdish advocacy. I see you very vocal for many years to get support for the Kurds in DC, in New York, everywhere. What should the Kurds do? Now we have a government in Iraq, we have a Kurdistan regional government, we have the representative of Syria Democratic Forces in DC. What is your advice for them in terms of advocating for Kurds in the United States?
Stop playing games with the United States. If your demand is independence, make it clear. Stop trying to placate and please Donald Trump. He will never deliver Kurdish interests. If the Kurds want to have their own homeland, they should make it clear. They have paid a steep price with troops and treasure over the years. And when you look back at the past century, the U.S. has been involved in a series of betrayals of Kurdish interests, going back to the Treaty of Lausanne, all the way to this anniversary. So the Kurds need to stop trying to be nice with the Trump administration. They need to make clear what they want. And they need to mobilize friends in the media, in civil society, on Capitol Hill to amplify that message. I'm proud to be considered one of those friends. My message is clear. The U.S. should be supporting self-determination for Iraqi Kurdistan. It should be providing security assistance and working hand in glove with the Peshmerga to stabilize the situation.
Dr. Phillips, thank you very much, as always. I feel like the interview could go on for another hour because I really enjoy talking to you and I hope you be with us for the rest of the month until the election with the analysis and your deep insight. Thank you.
I won't be with you to the end of the election. I'll be with you deep into the future until we realize our political goals.
We are lucky to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.